Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. I am so glad that you can join me. I am excited for what we are doing right now. I'm just trying to go ahead and get rid of my, here we go. I think I did it, y'all. Trying to go ahead and get rid of my overlay so y'all could see me. I don't think you can see me. Just trying to get in here. But I wanted to just welcome everyone to our talk. Thank you for being here. Thank you for getting on board to see and to participate in this conversation. As most of you know, it is definitely going to be informative as always. It is definitely going to be something that I'm just excited about going ahead and having you all on here and to interact as we always do. So, welcome to Life Notes with Jen. I am your host, Jennifer M. Wilshire. I'm licensed clinical social worker, and I am the founder of Lifeline Therapy Center. And I participate as far as who I work with is in relationships, individuals with various mental health issues. But anyway, enough about me, because y'all should know me by now. I want to go ahead and just encourage you to participate in the live chat. We are here, we are on, and we want you to go ahead and to be a part of that. Right now, I wanted to actually go ahead and remind you this month of October is all about not just about pregnancy and infant loss awareness. It's also about this month we are commemorating domestic violence awareness, and we are also commemorating breast cancer awareness. I just wanted to give y'all a few tidbits that I think is really important because we don't want to disregard the fact that even though we are really focusing in on pregnancy and infant loss awareness. And those who go through it are survivors. Those who go through domestic violence issues or becoming a victim are also now survivors, and anyone going through breast cancer, survivor as well. So we want to acknowledge that. And I just want to share a few tidbits with you, especially for anyone experiencing or going through domestic violence. I wanted to just share this. I just put this down on the screen for y'all to see. If you feel like you are in imminent danger or you suspect that a friend or someone that you love, go ahead and get on that website, call that number, or text if you are in a place or in a position where you are ready to start, ready to go ahead and to get the help that you need. That's so important. It's so important, but no one can do it for you until you're ready. And I love this site because it just gives so much information. It's free, it's 24/7, it's confidential. You can talk about a safety plan. They even have security capabilities on there, y'all, on the site where you can actually escape out of the site if you're worried about the abuser or attacker possibly checking your internet, surfing. That you can just press a button and it'll go right back to like this generic, whatever your internet web browser is, it'll go right back to that. You can chat live on the site. And this is something that you can access not just on a laptop, you can access it on your tablet, on your phone, but definitely want you to know that you are not alone. You want to go ahead and get that information and make sure that you are aware as to how you can get help. And for breast cancer awareness, I wanted to tell you guys about two sites you want to go ahead and check out, which is the Susan G. Komen site for breast cancer awareness, and also want to make sure that you are aware of the, I believe it's called, hold on, I had my stuff set up. I'm not unorganized, y'all. I had this together. I promise you I did. But it is basically walking and fighting for the needs of those who are breast cancer survivors and those who are actually going through it in the moment. It's so important that you are in a place and in a position where you are aware of what's going on, where you are aware of how to deal with this. On these websites, you're able to get all types of information. You're able to also get information as far as what centers to go to, where you can get financial help if needed. And just being in a place and in a position where you can go ahead and be empowered to not stay in your situation. So this is basically fighting against breast cancer, and this is what it's called. It's called the American Cancer Society Making Strides Against Breast Cancer. I don't know how I forgot that. But if you go to I can't talk today. Cancer.org. You can find out all this information. Definitely want to also share with the Susan G. Komen website. Today, they're honoring up until today, October 31st, they are honoring and tripling, I believe, any donations being made for breast cancer survivors and breast cancer research. So if you want to go ahead and check them out, that's Susan, SUSANGKOMEN. And it's actually www.komen.org. Okay. So you want to go ahead and check that out, y'all. And we will definitely, if you need resources or more information or support, please do reach out. You are not alone in this. And more than anything, as always, that I say, therapy can help, and so it can't necessarily hurt or harm. It can either help or do nothing at all. Where you felt like you were paying to talk to somebody, and that's it. You got nothing out of it, but you have nothing to lose and definitely so much to gain if you feel that you need support or help. I want to go ahead and invite my guests, Dr. AC Pierre Lewis. I am so excited for her to be here. It looks like y'all still can't see me. So I am trying to get out of this, and I thought I had it, but maybe I don't. There we go. Okay. There we go. So let me go ahead and bring AC in. We are here together. This is Dr. AC, excuse me, Pierre Lewis, really Dr. Pierre Lewis. And we want to go ahead and just have her take a moment to introduce herself. So, Dr. Pierre Lewis, please go ahead, take a moment and tell us about you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I want to say just thank you for you, Jen, for all the work that you're doing and really bringing awareness to three topics that I think are near and dear to both of us.
Mhm.
Cancer awareness has become a strong topic recently for me. Domestic violence is where I began, and now maternal mental health is another area which we are both very much um, in work where we're advocating for our clients and really being able to provide. And of course, October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Month, so it only makes sense that we are having this conversation today. I
Absolutely.
am a clinical psychologist
Yes.
and I own my private practice, and maternal mental health is our specialty.
Awesome. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, AC, is tell us about why you went into maternal mental health. Because I know that even though you work with all types of clients, that's actually your specialty, your expertise. You've presented on that topic, you've gone ahead and been to conferences and been a presenter. So tell us about why maternal mental health. Why is that so dear to your heart?
Okay. I think what is always said about clinicians is that we are not sitting across from our clients by accident.
Mm,
Just the affinity. I've always had an affinity to work with women, and not that I don't work with men, and I do. I enjoy it. It's quite a different type of challenge.
right.
But I think for me, I'm a feminist at heart, willing to allow. partners, male partners, to support me thoroughly. So it's not very stringent, but the love for women and who we are, the complexity in which we bring to the table, and the challenges that we experience. I think there's just power in how we're able to interact with one another. But I think for me, it just kind of happened. Of course,
Mm,
I became a mom a
yeah.
couple years ago, 11 years ago. And through that experience, I did experience postpartum depression myself, which I think the numbers are so high in which other women experience postpartum depression. It's just that people are
Yeah.
not really talking it as much as before. And then also too, having had a miscarriage myself, which I think more women than not experience miscarriages. What does that mean? And so
Yeah.
starting with a postpartum link was where it began. And then from there, naturally, the world of infertility, the world of miscarriages, stillbirth, baby loss, infant loss is really part of that conversation. And so for me, it just kind of led, it was easy transition into this space. And when I looked around where I was and I wanted to open my private practice, there's not a place that's specific for around this particular topic. And so I wanted to be then that source, which I am the only source that there is in Orange County that provide this type
Wow.
of therapy in
Wow.
Orange County, New York. And so
Mhm.
we're really proud of what we've done, and we've expanded in Westchester County as well as the Bronx as well. So we're making moves and causing great impact.
Now, would you say, AC, that I'm sorry, see,
It's totally
Dr.
okay.
Pierre
We're
Lewis
AC.
is
We're
also my
AC. You
sister
don't know.
friend. And so it's like I'm trying to transition y'all and stay in the moment.
It's totally okay. It's
But
totally okay.
Dr. Pierre Lewis, tell me about, why do you think there is such a, not a scarcity, but why are you the only one doing that in your town or in the area? I think that's really interesting that no
Right.
one else is doing it.
Well, I really think that most people who, when they're opening their private practice, they're thinking general.
Mm,
And maybe they're, instead of very specifically focused, maybe that might be overwhelming. Or as a provider, you're thinking about how can I provide support to most people? And
right.
so it's limited. But also, too, I just think the topic has not been something that's been reinforced or talked about until more recently,
Mm,
and it being now a source of a resource for many people. That's all I can really think of, is just there's so many specific topics around psychology that I
yeah.
think most people are trying to do general versus having the more inward lens of, wait, there's a specific area that I could hone my skill set in,
Yeah.
instead of worrying about really meeting everyone's needs. And when you're trying to meet everyone's needs, there are pockets of population that you're not being very specialized in, and they're really losing that opportunity to see another
Mm,
therapist who, like, unlike you, but unlike me, who does just general. They're not really going to get what we are providing. And so that's important
yeah.
that you and I have this physical specialty that we're now able to say we are experts in some way.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask you, so I guess just getting right into it, one of the questions that I had is when it comes to the loss of a baby, meaning that a person actually has, according to society or according to people, that they have a right to go ahead and to grieve the loss of this baby. Is it dependent? Do you find that it's dependent on the developmental age of the baby, that it's valid, or people feel that, well, it's valid, your pregnancy was valid, or, the baby was so early on in your pregnancy, you can always have other babies, it's okay. And how do you feel about that as far as life? And I also wonder, does that tie into people's belief of when life starts? So, I know
Mm.
that kind of goes into the political stuff, and you don't have to touch that too much, but it does go into the political stuff of pro-life and all that. But do you believe that anyone who may be thinking that way also may believe, well, life starts when, the baby is what we would call out of utero? For anyone who may not know, that's like the baby's out of the womb, they're here. So what would you say to that, Dr. Pierre Lewis?
Like you said, this is a multi-layered question. I do appreciate you recognizing that the impact of one's belief, political or spiritual beliefs about when life starts, can definitely impact how aware they are of
Mm.
someone's experience, right? Or how willing that they're able to validate someone's experience. So, with regards to pro life, their perspective on that definitely can impact. But overall, I think the death of a infant or a child or an embryo or a being, let's say that, right? Being,
Yeah.
um, that that out of time death is uncomfortable for many people, and they don't understand what it means to mourn a being that did not exist outside of the belly,
Yeah.
outside of the utero. And so
Mm.
I think it's uncomfortable, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, um, and it's a disenfranchised grief, which is a grief that a small area of a population experience. It's not something that most people are able to really fully empathize with. And so,
Yeah.
not understanding, they are very much willing to be very much dismissive of the experience. But as
Mm.
you and I know, a loss is a loss. A
Absolutely.
loss is a loss,
Yeah.
whether it's 2 weeks, whether it's 3 months, whether it's 6 weeks, whether it's 39 weeks as well. And so, really understanding that component is really powerful. Maybe you on the outside don't understand, but for that person, that family understands that this is a loss. And it's not really just a loss of today, right now, this moment. It's really like I want to always reinforce for someone that they've been thinking about wanting to have children way before these 2 weeks in which when they lost a child for a
Yeah.
miscarriage.
Yeah.
We're talking about years and years and years of anticipating, expecting, desiring a child. So when that is not happening or it's taken away from you, they are allowing themselves to grieve. And most of the people who do experience it don't even understand the impact of why it's so heart wrenching. Well, it was only or just 5 weeks. No, it wasn't just 5 weeks. So I
Mm.
think there's a lot of complexity that makes it
Yeah.
much more difficult for really anyone who's even experiencing it themselves, but those outside of that experience to really fully validate it. Hopefully, I was
Absolutely.
able to answer that question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think you were right on with responding to that. I also think that another question that I think is important is also understanding where people may validate a loss when the person has already had children. You know, we think, well, you already have 2 kids, you already have 4 kids, you already have 5 kids, or you're young, you can get pregnant again, so it's no big deal. But tell me about your experience with that, and how do you help someone process that as far as their grief? Is it different to provide therapy and support to someone who already has children versus someone who doesn't have children at all?
Right. Um, I it cringe makes me cringe when there are so many dismissive statements that you just
Mhm.
identified that you may have heard yourself or you've heard some of your clients are challenged with those statements that you just said. And it goes back to a loss is a loss. And while the dynamic maybe you may have had one child, secondary infertility is very much more overwhelming because you're looking at the loss through a different lens. You know what you've missed, you know what you would have had, and
Mhm.
so even your awareness of the having children before makes the loss of secondary fertility different versus someone who's had infertility prior and then now they have children afterwards. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
different dynamics in which really truly impact. And so someone whom I am treating that may have in secondary infertility, it really talks about what brings them to the table. It all depends on how long their spiritual beliefs. It all depends on how their reaction to the loss. For
Yeah.
some women, having that secondary infertility, it's not that they are no longer um, grateful for the children that they've had prior. Their experience of this loss, what it means for them at that moment in time, is very
Right.
specific to their experience. So for me, it's really allowing whoever it is that's sitting across from me to kind of give me the context of the dynamics of their perspective. And that then will allow me to then provide support to them through the lens in which makes sense for them. So I'm not coming in reinforcing a certain value versus another, I am trying to reflect what they're experiencing and providing support through that context, and maybe help them do some reframing, or just really being able to hold space in a healthy manner in order for them to now find that effective and healthy grieving.
Yeah.
Having a secondary infertility for people, they're not even anticipating that.
Yeah.
That is in itself a loss, because
Yeah.
were able to have children quickly, easy, maybe the first
How
two
did this
times.
happen to
And
me? Sort of.
yeah, yeah, talk to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And tell me, absolutely, I think that's so on point what you're saying. Tell me also about, as far as helping them to move forward, do you notice a difference, excuse me, as far as a person who's never had children versus someone who has had children, as far as their process, is it longer for someone who doesn't have children versus someone who already does because they have the kids? And some people would think that, like, oh, you'll be able to bounce back because you have the other kids. Can we, sort of debunk that myth? Because I would say that's a myth.
I think that is definitely a myth, and I think again it's very specific.
Yeah,
The space that you're in terms of readiness. Maybe the first two children you had when you were in your teens, and now you're more mature in your age, and now there's this desire in terms of, wherever you are in the context in which how you perceive and anticipate that experience. So I would say it's very specific, and for you and I to say, because you've had children before, and now the other loss, you could process through the grief faster, I think that would be invalidating. It's
yeah,
again honoring that person's experience. So for some people, you might find that they're able to move on and grieve through faster because they could lean onto the children they've had before. And others, they might find themselves being stuck. Again, it all depends of the context, the circumstances, the life experiences in which they are. And I mean, there's so many factors in terms of even loss in other areas of their life, you know,
right, right.
that may be even conjunction to that. So
Yeah,
the reality is really owning and helping someone own their space, and validating their space in which they're in, without us, the outside world, really putting in our own perspective of how it should be, and really allow them to be able to grieve in a healthy way. Healthy grieving is what the goal is,
yes.
and really holding on to that.
Yeah, yeah. Do you also notice a difference in terms of, I know, but I want to make sure we clarify, for the people who are tuning in, as far as cultural, a person of color versus a white person, or, whomever, or someone from a different cultural background. So, I believe the African American experience is unique from the Caribbean experience, even though, we're all of the Black race, but our thinking, our thought process, our ways, our rituals, so on and so forth is quite different. And then, so speaking to someone who's white, someone who's Asian, would you say it's all unique, in your practice and what you've experienced? Or it's like, again, going back to loss is a loss, how is it similar, and then how is it different in your
I think
perspective?
what would say the similarity is the complexity of the individual experience right? So that's the similarity. But
Yeah,
then conjunction to that is the cultural piece in terms of one validating a grief, validating the loss. Some cultures are much more, or even familiar culture with regards to your family. When
yeah,
someone loses someone, they are able to fully navigate that, embrace that with a little bit healthier groove, versus maybe someone who's of a particular race. Or so that component, I think, is very independent on the culture and also the
yeah.
familiar context. So
Mhm.
there's a nuance that I think it's not easy for us to be able to put in a box. And understanding, again, it's really connecting to that woman, that culture, that family, and really being able to provide that support system for them. And really, just for you in your own journey as a woman in a family that's grieving, for you to then know that, for you to make space for that experience.
Yeah. Can you also speak to Dr. Pierre Lewis? What's the worst thing we can do? And I want to include dads in this, fathers or fathers to be or expectant fathers, because sometimes they get brushed off or pushed to the side because it's not their body. This
Mm,
baby's not
mm,
coming out of you. But we can acknowledge and we know that without that man, there is no baby. Half and half. We need both. So can you speak to what's the worst thing, and then I guess for the woman first and then also for the man, but what's the worst thing we can do if we're the ones who have lost a pregnancy or have experienced a stillbirth as a woman, or and then speak to as the man, like what's the worst thing that if that's our experience, some of us are going through it right now. I don't know everyone's
mm-hmm,
situation.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So can you break that down for women and then for men?
Okay. I think you began to touch upon that, and I think as clinicians, we know the invalidating piece is the most heart-wrenching impact that may happen for all of us, right?
Yeah.
Hearing these statements of you're young still, or you already had a child, or it's okay, or maybe even using a religious perspective and say, it was meant to be, or
Mhm.
if and I think people are trying to ultimately, I really think most people, they're not trying to be invalidating, they're trying to be comforting. And in
Mm,
comforting is really trying to let me take your pain away and tell you, now, it'll be okay.
mm,
You'll be fine.
mm,
You could just try again. It's fine. You'll be okay. You don't have to be a mom. Not every, whatever it is that people are really trying to, is
right.
really more than anything, is that they're not trying to invalidate, they're trying to comfort. And in
Yeah.
comforting, because they're coming in as a way to take away the grief and trying to lessen the grief, they now have caused more grief. And
Mm,
so
mhm.
that is really, I think, the most impactful component, that others who are not experiencing the loss come into someone else's life and now introducing these ideas, because they're uncomfortable sitting in the grief. They're uncomfortable knowing that someone's in pain and they can't do anything about it. And this is their way of inserting themselves to provide support, and they're not able to.
Wow. Yeah.
So with regards to males, though, it's more of an even deeper level, because oftentimes no one's paying attention to them. They're back there in the background. The way they experience loss looks different. I
Yeah.
think there is a gender component in terms of how women maybe embrace their loss and their grief. They'll allow themselves to curl up and really be in a fetal position and wail and cry, depending on your cultural experience. And
Right.
then the males, they're out there chopping wood, they're out there doing things, trying to be as avoidant as possible, because there is a general idea, we understand, that maybe males, they are the way they are cultured and shaped and supported in society is not to show and express their emotions. And so you see that very much showing up during the time of their mourning process of their child that they would have had,
Right.
and they're now being busy, they're doing busy work. And
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
the woman will allow themselves to really sit in the pain. And so sometimes, and we haven't talked about this in terms of how couples impact, but the way the couples, and it's not only, right, but how couples really experience the grief process, the person who carried, the person who does not carry, sometimes is very different. And that causes a lot of problems sometimes in many marriages. And I've seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, it's so important to understand whenever there is a loss, as you were speaking to, it's going to impact each individual person in that relationship. And it's going to impact how you're showing up in your
Hmm.
relationship. And we need to
Hmm.
be so mindful about that when we
Hmm.
think about loss. Like I have a friend who recently lost her mom, and we were speaking to, but she's lost a baby before and has had infertility issues amongst other things. And she lost just different people in her life, and we were talking about the fact of her husband being such a strong pillar for her, but just because he's not showing up in his grief the way that she is doesn't mean that he's not grieving. And we need to be so mindful about that, that grief shows up in different ways for all of us, and we all have to go through it in our own way, in our own journey. And one of the key things, I'm sure you say this too, Dr. Pierre Lewis, because I know I do in therapy, is don't let anyone tell you how to grieve with my clients. You go ahead and you do it in the way that you need to do it. And it's a journey. It's not a marathon. There's really no end point, and I
Mhm,
recently had a
mhm,
client who was saying, I just want to stop being sad.
mm.
I was talking to a friend of mine about that, and she's like, can we just get over being sad? But I'm like, you just recently had this loss, like literally a few months ago. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
we have to talk about in
Mm.
order to get to joy and happiness and peace and all that great jazz, we have to talk about the reason why you came to talk to me in the first place. So we
Mhm,
have to
mhm,
go to sadness. We have to
mhm,
go to that place. And I just want to give this analogy, and I think that a lot of people will be able to receive it and to take it on and to get a lesson from this. I was also speaking to the same client and saying, imagine that you're on this boardwalk. And most of us know on the boardwalk, we're usually by the boardwalk has a beach has an ocean, all that. And on the boardwalk, it's a crowd. Everyone's on the boardwalk. And think about the boardwalk as all of us on this boardwalk of the journey of our lives.
mm,
But at some
mhm,
point, when we're going through certain things, we have to get off the boardwalk and go on the sand, on the beach. And then things get worse. And if, God forbid, you have to experience a loss, you now have to go in that ocean, and it can either break you or it can make you, and it can build
mm,
you up and help you to see a new normal. And so I believe the work that we have to do with our clients is to understand, especially those with grief or anyone. It's not just our clients, because whoever's watching, you may not go to therapy, you may decide, I'm just going to read a book or anything else like that. So the work that you need to do with and for yourself is to be able to say, I'm going through the ocean right now, but I'm going to be like a surfer. I'm on a surfboard. And what happens to the surfer who is experienced or well equipped? They stand firm on that surfboard, and so the waves don't stop crashing. They keep coming, and they're getting wet and they're going through the motions, but literally the wave eventually passes and they're standing. But then there are those of us who are learning how to surf, and we're learning how to, just get our bearings. And so we may fall and stumble, but we hold on to the surfboard. And so that's what I believe the grieving process can be like, is that you hold on to the surfboard, waves are still coming, you just don't let go. Because if you allow it to break you, then you're going to drown. And
mm, mhm,
eventually you get back on the sand. You get back on the beach. I don't think you'll ever get back on the boardwalk, because now you've got a new normal. You're not the same person that you were before you got on the beach, And so being on the beach, though, sometimes you're going to have to go into that ocean. And what's that ocean? The triggers. That's the smell that reminds you of that person. That's,
mhm,
a particular place you all might have gone to. It can be going to the doctor's office or the hospital if you were pregnant, and having to go back to a doctor may be traumatizing for you. That I don't want to have to deal with this again. I don't want to have to think about the loss. And you may just be going for a regular checkup, or you
mhm,
broke your arm and you're triggered by that and you're going back to that place. But hold on. That's the message Dr. Pierre Lewis and I think, essentially want to give to all of you, and to encourage anyone who hasn't gone through it, but someone who has. Remind them to hold on and be there for them to hold on, and not just simply allow the waves to take over, and I just think that's so important to consider. We're all going to have to go through loss at some point. It may not be pregnancy, but it may be a parent, it may be a sibling. At the end of the day, our number will be called. and we'll have to
Mm.
face it, and essentially that's really important to keep that in mind. I don't know if you want to add anything to what I just said before I move on.
The only, and by the way, powerful analogy there. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we're talking about loss around pregnancy and infant loss, but really loss overall and how we experience different types of loss throughout our
Yeah.
times, and even the loss of a loved one. So sometimes, even generally, too, I would ask someone who taught you how to grieve, right?
Mm.
And part of
Mhm.
the grieving
Yeah.
process, if you were able to even look at the water and surfing before someone learns how to surf, sometimes it's someone else who's teaching them, a teacher of some kind, whether it's the parent or the culture or messaging that you've received in terms of how to whether honor loss or dismiss loss,
Mhm.
and
Mm.
really looking at that. And so when you're coming in experiencing your pregnancy or infant loss or stillbirth, and you're having difficulty challenging yourself to sit in it or allowing yourself to make space for it, sometimes it's because of who taught you not to grieve. And that's the reason why that almost causes a block. Or maybe the
Yeah.
people who are
Wow.
coming in and say, now will be okay. Maybe because they haven't been taught how to grieve in a healthy way. So you have those components all at play, really kind of allowing whether someone really does deep dive into the water and, God
Mm.
forbid, drown in it, or they're able to stumble through and get back on the
Yeah.
surfboard, or somebody's able to say or remember, like, oh, I remember my mom or my dad. This is how they taught me, whether it was implicitly or explicitly, how to grieve.
Yeah.
But that is something that really all of us are able to connect together in humanity, talking about what connects us.
Yeah.
All of us have
Yeah.
experienced loss of various degree, and really understanding that a loss is a loss.
Absolutely. And you brought up such a great point. Thank you for that. Because it also reminds me, or I believe it connects to the fact of being mindful after you have to go through the grief process, or as you experience grief, better actually, who you keep around you. Who are you surrounding yourself with, and
Mhm,
what are you exposing yourself to? What are you watching? What are you reading? What are you listening to? And what are you just allowing to absorb into your mind, into your heart, into your soul, essentially. And I say that because I think about, just as you were saying, who taught you how to grieve? I think about people who go through substance abuse treatment and recovery. One of the things that is essential for someone who's actually doing the work, meaning the sponsor or the therapist, they have usually been, most oftentimes they are a former, uh, excuse me, substance abuser, or someone who used substances in some form. And so they've been there and they've done that. And that's why they do the work so well, And so it's important to keep that in mind. Who are you around? Who are you allowing to influence your thought process? Be a part of your grieving experience, because you don't need a whole tribe or a squad to be involved. You don't have to tell everybody your business, y'all. If
mhm,
you don't remember anything we said, you don't have to tell everybody your business. You don't have to make a public service announcement. Hey, y'all,
mhm,
I went through, this loss. I'm going through. You really just have to use discernment, because not everyone
mhm,
can handle it. Sometimes you may have to go through a loss. And if we're speaking back to what we're speaking on, pregnancy loss, and not say a word. Some people are walking around and you would have no idea that they experienced it. Either they are now in a position or a place where it's like, oh, I'm good. I don't have kids, but I have this wonderful husband. And you would have not known unless they tell their story, about the fact that they've lost, or they have children already. You wouldn't know that in between those kids, there was a loss that
mhm,
left an
mhm,
impact on them, and
mhm,
so
mhm.
just so important. What do you think about that as well, Dr. Pierluce, as far as who you keep around you, and your environment? What would you say about, for the women and the men? And really, I would talk back also to the men. Like, what do they need? Do they need accountability? Do they need to talk to someone outside of the person that they're with?
Right. I love the idea of really kind of setting up a cocoon, right? A healthy cocoon during the times of the first few stages in which you're vulnerable. Even we know the first year is the first year that's the hardest, right? In terms of
Yeah.
reminder, it brings you back to day one so quickly. So I like the idea of really being intentional about the exposure of books that you're reading, what you're watching. And if you know you've experienced any type of loss, you turn on the TV, that's all that there you see. And so really it's just really being intentional. It's interesting because there's a thin line between telling people about your loss and then not telling people about your loss. If you
Mm,
were then to tell people about your loss, you want to be intentional who you are sharing that particular vulnerable experience with.
with, yeah.
Because if you do make a public service announcement, you have Joe Schmo, Jackie Smith, whomever, who now feel like they have the authority to tell you and now
Yep.
makes all these dismissive statements. But if you
Right.
are intentional about telling your closest friends who you know they understand you, they understand to honor the grief, then you want to be able to have that because you do not want to be isolated. And so the other component is now understanding that you may not need to tell people day one. Just really know what works for you. And I think sometimes people may not know themselves enough to know what works for them. And so they're kind of getting through it and maybe
Yeah.
stumbling through it as they go. I would say for sure you want to be able to seek resources, therapy, if that isn't something you're willing to sink your teeth in. Sometimes groups, and even sometimes in those groups I've had women who come into me post loss. They say that some of the groups, again, the group may be where people are stuck and encouraged to stay in that place and that not allow space
Mm.
for movement, that every day someone's repeating the same stories and they're not really
Uh,
allowing movement for growth
yeah.
outside
Yeah.
of the group in order to really retain that. So you really have to be discerned and intentional about what you do, who do you tell, and how you plan on taking care of yourself through the process.
Right.
And sometimes it might need with a therapist to be able to help guide you, or maybe a book, or your spiritual leaders at your church, however that may be. With regards to males, again, we talked about really not honoring. I think it starts with that your grief matters, right?
Yes.
You lost a child yourself, and it's
Right.
okay to mourn, and it's okay that your mourning process looks different, like the your partner. I have a couple right now that just gave birth to still baby a couple weeks ago.
Mhm.
So we're going 8 weeks. I saw them 2 weeks in, right after the loss of the baby. And the female partner is saying to her husband, you know, you are supportive to me during my grief. And I feel so good that I have that. But now I feel lost in not being able to help you grieve and be a support system because you're not saying anything. Truth of the matter is,
Mhm.
this male partner doesn't really interact with his emotions. They're not friends. He doesn't allow his emotions to kind of come through. And he comes from his
Mm.
cultural beliefs. He's very much Irish, and they're not really kind of reinforcing the emotional component. So you're now dealing with someone who is emotionally handicapped to some extent.
Mm.
Now they are now intersecting with a life altering loss, not knowing what to do. And now her pace in the grief process look a lot different. And so there's a little bit of disengagement of they're not able to align together. And
Yeah.
now really being able to own and honor where he is and his challenges, honor where she is, understand that this connection may happen. Now, where is the space that they could intentionally connect together? And that has to
Mm.
be intentional on both sides and how that may show up.
Yeah, yeah, that's powerful. And as far as, even with the way that a woman may go through her emotions and her process, where the partner, the man may feel like, how dare I, even share anything with her because society may have told him and he's believed it to be true that you don't have the right to
Right.
be vulnerable. Both of you can't be vulnerable, at the same time. Somebody has to be strong, and so even through the grief, but speaking to how you can grieve together and do it well, how you can live truly, as the title of this vlog is, living after losing. How can you live well after losing together without minimizing the other person's experience? And I think for some of us women, we may be guilty of telling him you don't have the right to say anything
Mhm.
right now, and he
Mhm.
may try, and then because of what you just said, he completely shut down. Like, okay, it is what it is, you in it. If you need anything, I'll be over there, you know. But can you speak to how it is that, you know, you can have healthy grieving together? What does that really look like in partnership, in relationship, and, you know, us as women also feeling like he doesn't have the right, you know, to go
Mhm.
ahead and do.
It's interesting because I think most people not being aware of the stages, right? Although we know that the stages are not linear. So the stage of denial, numbness, shock is the first stage. Then we know that anger sometimes shows up after that,
Mhm.
bargaining and asking questions, what could I have done? And really kind of really trying to insert yourself in, almost taking responsibility or blame. And I
Yeah.
think that's how people really try to find a sense of control, or maybe even punishing themselves and saying, I should
Mhm.
have, right? Those
Mhm.
shoulds, as a way to make sense of their grief because they're trying to control the experience, or maybe control the waves that are coming in. And then
Yeah.
we may experience a depression and acceptance and meaning, which is really powerful. I recently did a 2 day intensive training on meaning and what that looks like with regards to loss for psycho-oncology. And so not being aware that stages are available to them for them to note that is
Mhm.
one area that may be challenging. But I think ultimately most people are saying, how can I grieve, but I have to go back to work? I didn't have a baby. Well, I did have a baby. I gave birth to a still baby, but now
Mhm.
I'm no longer given the opportunity. I was at Woody for 6 weeks or however weeks it is that I normally get for the postpartum process. So I
Right.
have to go to work. So it's really the struggle of, how do I still grieve or live after losing, right? And to do that is, most people try to avoid and dismiss and minimize. And
Yeah.
that, as we already said, whether people are doing it to you on the outside or you're doing it for yourself, is one of the major, more difficult thing that you could do for your grief process. So for couples, first of all, is really understanding. I usually go into, how are you grieving? How are you grieving? Who taught you how to grieve? Who taught you how to grieve? What is your relationship with emotions? What is
Mm.
your relationship with emotions? When you guys have had troubles in relationships before, how do you come together? So these are just basics that in which we have conversations about, to really now superimpose the grief on top of all the foundations that we know exist. And so when
Right.
we're able to do an anatomy of that experience and their relationship together, over time, we're able to now find out how we then can intersect this grief process on top of the way they used to be. And so
Mhm.
sometimes I will tell a couple, be intentional. The couple who I'm currently seeing is that really making time for them to be able to um, grieve together, whether they're going to go on a hike, whether they're going to write a letter
Mhm.
to the baby, whether they're going to um, watch a movie, or they're going to maybe do a type of a funeral of some kind with
Right.
regards to anything that they have, whether to maybe give money to a foundation, whether to reconnect on a weekly basis to check in. How are you doing? What do you need? Right? And we almost sometimes talk about the love languages within that component.
Right.
How can I fill your bucket? How can I fill your bucket? And sometimes I see, at least the particular male partner that now I'm seeing, is that he struggles greatly in sharing his feelings because he's not a talker, but he
Mhm.
feels it. And so now we're really talking about, how do you make your partner aware that you're still in mourning? And we talk about using your touch. So now there's an identified touch as the way he communicates to her. I am thinking about our daughter who passed away, but she's very hyperverbal. So she's expecting, if he's not talking, that he's not feeling. And so
Mm.
now understanding, is it okay for him to use this particular way of communicating via behavior, via a physical touch, as a way to share and connect with you? I am also grieving. And so then we've been working on that together. So,
That's
but there's just ways in really talking about it, and really it starts with communicating with each other and getting on the same page.
I love that. And, I wanted to actually put in, just encourage if you all have questions, because we're running on time as well. Want to respect Dr. Pierre Lewis's time and just not overwhelm anyone with all this information. And we just think that it's important to be mindful about grief. So I just put in the 5 stages of grief by Kubler Ross, who is a former therapist. I believe she was a psychologist and researcher. But I put that down because it's important to know what you're feeling is not abnormal. You're going through the process, and this is how it's ordered according to her. But she also states the importance of knowing that you can go in and out of these stages, and it doesn't have the particular order. So it may not be denial first, it may be depression first, and then the anger, and sometimes I've even read with research later on, because these stages were developed a long time ago, but as time has developed and we've seen people and seen their experience with grief, that sometimes somebody may not go through one of the 5 stages. And I think that there's also been more research and in expanding the stages of grief. So now there are more. But I definitely just wanted to point those out. And I don't know if you wanted to speak to the 5 stages as well. You sort of touched on it before, but now that I put
Right.
it down, was there anything you wanted to add to
The
that?
only thing I wanted to add is I think part of the awareness is knowing that those 5 stages of grief, they not, like you said, they might be applicable to you at a certain time. It's just to be aware, like, oh,
Yeah.
how do a check-in, right? I often ask people wherever they are, for whatever circumstance they are, right, as a way for them to develop awareness around the emotions. Asking yourself on a day-to-day basis, how am I doing? That question activates a response. And
Mhm.
now knowing how you're doing is now an awareness of your emotion. Now you could put an act in reframing, processing, validating, right? So there's something that you're able to do. And so, and ask yourself, how am I doing on a day-to-day basis or hourly basis, if you want? Then that way you'll know, like, oh, wait, I feel like kind of angry. I am in the angry stage right now. Now you
Mhm.
get to validate that.
Yeah.
But I know why. Oh, my tone, or I'm feeling kind of restricted or constricted in my chest. I know why. So really being aware that those stages exist, asking yourself, how am I doing? And then from there, you're able to now validate what stage you're in, and now normalizing, like, this is a healthy, you're doing healthy. You're not running away and you're not avoiding. And now it
Mhm.
doesn't take you over. It doesn't really take you over, that, like those waves you were referring to.
Yeah. Tell me about, as far as reframing, is there a specific thought you can go over? And again, if anyone has any questions, if you're tuned in, please put it in the chat. We are here to respond, and we want to hear from you. But tell me about what that looks like, for reframing for someone who may not know. Is there a specific thought that we know to be true that's pretty consistent with anyone who's lost, and what's an example of how they can reframe it, or make it different? Hopefully I'm not
Well,
putting you on the
it's okay. And while when I use the word reframe, I think we have to really truly be careful around that. Because reframing, oftentimes, when we use it with CBT, is just giving someone a different lens in which to how interpret a situation. And when
spot.
it comes to loss, you may not be able to reframe, but at least trying to find meaning in your experience. Not meaning like, oh, the baby not being here, it was meant to be. However, your perspective may be. For some people, that makes sense. That gives them comfort. For other people, it's rejecting and validating.
Mhm.
And so it's really being able to reframe, is just really shifting your thought in a space where you can find comfort to be able to live another day.
Yeah.
So it's very specific in terms of, um, for someone who is struggling. Again, I'm going to that couple that I'm currently seeing. One of the ways I guess we could use the word reframe is to really honor the legacy of that child, right? That being. And so it's talking about, really, this baby existed. This baby lived in the belly. And so there's a legacy already by
Mm.
this being having been alive and right and growing and all of that. There's a legacy for you to hold on to. And there's a legacy even after that she's no longer here that you'd attune to. And now that I remember, there's a young man who's a police officer I'm seeing, a Hispanic young man in the Bronx. He lost his son 6 months. SIDS, right? Sudden
Mm.
infant
That's
death
sensitive.
syndrome. And so, with that, our reframe, if we were to use that word, in finding meaning after living after losing, is to really say, he wants to be recluse. He wants to almost not laugh or not want to live again, right? And
Mhm.
then I said to him, your baby's not here, yet you're here. You are given breath every day.
Mm.
And so, one way for you to honor your child is to live. He's not having that opportunity. And it is a way to challenge him. I said, how dare you not live? How dare you not try to take the joys of this world, the experiences with your parents, with your partner, the environment. You've given an opportunity for another day, and you're not utilizing that. How do you honor your child's legacy if you're now not living when he wasn't given this opportunity? So that's a different way. And that kind of landed for him. And not everybody that would land for, but that
Right.
landed tremendously for him. And now I think he's allowing himself to give himself permission to live. And not, even though he's living, it doesn't mean that he's not still missing and mourning his child. A parent will never not know and
Right.
remember and experience some level of intensity of your pain. It is hope that in healthy grieving that the intensity is not the same as day one. Because if it is day one, 5 years later, that will be, for me, is something that's challenging. Have you fully grieved? But the pain and the existence and missing and knowing, understanding that void will fully exist. And so that's the challenge that I presented in front of him. While someone else, we talked about legacy through the lens. So it varies based on where they are. And honestly, because I'm a woman of God, however and whatever the Holy Spirit lands on my heart to say is where I go. And I trust that tremendously. As a therapist, you know what it feels like when you're being led. And I think during those moments, which I'm very much appreciative why I'm given the opportunity, the specialty in which I'm in, it's because I am meeting clients at the depth of their despair. And so
Mhm.
my job is to help journey with them. And whether I use the word God in the session or not, it is still the same work in really helping them, honoring their loss, being able to grieve, give back to the community, be a healthy person for yourself, for your partner, just overall being a healthy human being that is ultimately representation of our Lord. And so for me, that is where I was. And I think at that moment, that was what was placed in my heart to share. And thank goodness it landed. And I think that has made a big difference for him.
That's powerful. And to not continue to stay on that because you worded that so perfectly, and spoke to that so perfectly. But that's something you can apply in general to grief, as far as the way that you honor your loved one's life is to live your life. And to live it well, because if they were, especially if they're an adult, or if it was a child who was older, then that they would want you to move forward. And you can do all the things that Dr. Pierre Louis is talking about, as well as some of the things I mentioned, without having to dishonor their memory, because that's a big thing. And we need to normalize that for people, that they feel like, well, I can't go out here, or I can't do that. There's no way I'm ever going to a baby shower or a baby
Mm,
dedication, or coming around my family who has all these kids. I just can't, because I need to stay in my place, in my place of loss, and this is who I am. This is a part of your experience, but it's not who you are. And
mm,
when you come to that place of acceptance, like, it's a part of my story, but it's not who I am. It's not Jennifer. It's not Dr. Peerless. It's a part of my story, and I'm never the same, but it's a part of my story. And that's where the acceptance with, the grief, the
Grieving.
stages of grief really comes in. I guess as we sum things up.
Can I say one thing, please?
Yes, please do.
Real quickly, I have a client who lost a baby through stillbirth as well to another client, and
Mm,
she decided to, as a transformative experience in the giving meaning to her loss, in developing a library for of
mm,
resources for people in the community. And she
wow.
uh, humbly, and we humbly accepted to have the library at our office, where now she knew that there were no resources. She couldn't find any resources in the area when she lost her child. And now she, through her loss, giving meaning
Mm,
and living after losing, now there is this resource available for other families who are
yes.
grieving. And so she was able to allow that transformative power to show in. And that's the
Wow.
legacy of her losing her son.
Powerful. Yeah, absolutely. Our story, our life is for someone else. I always say
Mm.
that.
Hmm.
Our life is not just for us, it's for somebody else. Anything that we're going through, when we come to the place of overcoming or just being in a place of acceptance with loss, whatever it is that we're dealing with, difficulty, challenges, that we are able to say this is for someone else to know that they can hold on. They can push through this. They can continue to live. Oh, wow, you're able to go and attend that particular event. That's amazing. If you can do that, I can get the courage to do the same. And this is what we were talking about before, y'all, the importance of who are you around?
Mm.
Like, maybe expose yourself and be around someone who's doing it, someone who's active in living after losing, and really just gleaning some wisdom from them. Like, I don't know how you got there. You should be in the corner rocking yourself, but you're not. You seem to be okay. And just because a person is moving forward, because you never get over the loss, y'all. You never get over loss. You just don't. But just because they're moving forward doesn't mean that they're not hurting. It doesn't mean, uh-oh, I think I lost my guess. I lost Dr. Pierre Lewis. But I can speak to that, y'all. Hopefully she comes back in. That it's important to consider, what does that mean? What does it mean for you to move forward and to give yourself consent and permission to keep going? Oh, there she goes. Here we are. She's back. But I was just saying, giving yourself permission to move forward, that's what your loved one would want you to do. Even your baby, would want you to move forward. So, as we wrap up, just before you give your final words, and again, y'all, anyone has questions, Facebook, YouTube, if you're on, please do share so we can answer them. If not, hopefully you're just gaining all this information. We're dropping some gems and hopefully it's helping. But what are some of the worst things we can do if we are the people on the outside looking in at someone going through this experience? We have no idea what to say. We have no idea what to do. We don't know where to begin. This may be our first time seeing someone that we love lose in this way. And it's like, what do I say? I can't ask them, are you okay? Because they're not. So what would you say to that? I guess you can either speak to it, Dr. Pierre Lewis, in the form of what they could do or should do, or what they don't need to do. Please don't do this. Like, what would you say?
Please do not dismiss,
Right.
which we've said that. Please think before you speak.
Yes, yes,
Please understand the importance of honoring someone's pain.
yes,
Please understand that you don't have to be the one to help them through it, to heal. You don't have to be the one to try to make it all better.
yes.
And do this. You acknowledge that the pain exists for them. You say, my deepest condolences to you. I am with you in this. Let me know what I can do to support you.
Mm,
Is it okay for me to just send you a love text? Is it
mm,
okay for me to send you some flowers? Is it okay for me to send you some food? Whenever you're ready, I'm here for you. Is
mm.
it okay for me to check in once in a while?
Yeah.
You're now not trying to impede your own desires for in managing your own anxiety, you're
Right.
honoring you're
Yeah.
honoring that their pain exists. That's
Mhm.
powerful. And now you're making space and saying, I am available for you. What can I do? I've other these things that I know that I could feel like I could provide. And when you're ready, I'm willing. And can I check in 3 weeks from now? They'll say
Mhm.
yes. They'll say no, 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 I can't. That's okay. And understand that you don't have to be the savior. You don't have to have your hero cape on. And people know who cares. People know that you care by just sometimes just letting them know I'm here for you. You may not need to say anything else. I am here for you. I want to honor you.
Absolutely. That's so powerful. And I guess also, what would you say when people, I guess, who may come into your office and they're somewhat cynical about what can you do, even though we know in therapy it's not about the therapist giving you something. Of course we provide tools, we provide support, we give you counseling slash therapy, but it's a journey we're doing together, as client and therapist. But can you speak to those who are like, there's nothing you could tell me as a therapist? I lost my baby. You can't give me my baby back. I'm going through this loss. What are you really going to say to me to help me go through this? Because I got this hole in my heart. Nobody can say or do anything for me. So why am I even here?
I validate all of that. You're
Yes.
absolutely correct. I'm not going to be able to bring your baby back. I'm not going to take your pain completely away and wipe it off. I'm here to just be a support system to help hold space for you. However, you want to use that space, it is yours and yours for you. This hour is given to you. You utilize it. Today, you don't feel like coming in, that's okay. Next week, you want to come in, that's fine. As long as you and I know that we are going to journey this together. I could share about my history, my expertise, and everything like that, but nobody needs to hear that right now. I just want to be able to connect with someone on a humanity level
Yeah.
that you are human and so you experience loss and loss is painful. But I'm only here providing support for you, but I'm not able to erase anything. And I think sometimes people need to understand that I'm just here and willing to provide. Let me know when I could help and how I could help. Almost the same concept with regards to any layperson that's wanting to provide that support system. I haven't gotten that because people are coming in because they're already motivated, but you never know.
Absolutely. And so, since we don't have any questions or comments, just what would you say as your final statements, Dr. Pierre Louis? Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
being
I really
here.
appreciate your
Thank you.
invite always. And I'm just so grateful that this opportunity was presented that now, we could impact and provide support to others who are very much in need of it. And that your loss matters, your loss has weight. It's okay to be compassionate to yourself through the experience. There's not a one way to grieve. We just are trying to grieve it in a healthy way and to honor your loss. And so reinforcing the component of grief. And if you need that support system, please be intentional. Seek out the person who's can be able to provide for you. And you're welcome. And and that's all really. Just being honest with you in your process and be patient.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to, I mean, there's not too much more I could say. She summed it up so well. This conversation has been so profound. Before I go ahead and exit, I just want to share a few more resources that I think is important, specific to if you're going through loss or you want to find out how you can get support, or you want to find out if you're not the one going through loss, how you can support others. So, one of the things that I believe is so important for us to do in anything that we're going through is we get help before we go through stuff, being proactive. And marchofdimes.org is a powerful, amazing organization where most people know it for preemies, and helping to get resources for that. You have a March of Dimes walk that they do every year, and research to really help parents, excuse me, parents, let's not forget our men, we just said that. Parents find support when they have premature babies, but we want to consider and think about sometimes the loss of a baby can be prevented. And so, as you all may notice too, I haven't said miscarriage. And the reason why I haven't said that word is I actually detest that word, especially after I experienced my own loss. Because if you think about what the word miscarry means, it's literally break it down. You carried wrong, or if you misspoke, I said something wrong, or I said something out of context. I carried this baby out of context. I did it. It's had nothing to do with you. For most, if not all cases, there was nothing you could do. There was nothing you could do. Somebody needs to hear that today. There was nothing you could do. Nothing.
Mm.
And so it's just a matter of knowing that now you're here. And what are you going to do about it? You know, because you may need to just stay in your space and allow yourself, as Dr. Pierre Lewis said before, to sit with it. But after you sit with it, if it's becoming overwhelming, you don't have to be alone. And if you are pregnant and you're concerned and you've been told that you're high risk, definitely reach out to marchadimes.org. I also want to share this site that's called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And this is not for everyone, but they basically, their mission is to go ahead and to literally introduce parents into remembrance photography, to parents suffering the loss of a baby, with a free gift, y'all, a free gift of professional portraits. So you can go ahead and let me actually put that in the chat for anyone who wants that. But it's called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And this is if you lost your baby is now gone, and you want to capture that moment again. Not for everyone. Some people that's too much. It's painful and you don't want to deal with that. But this organization, again, you go to their website and you're able to see that they can assist and support, and it's free. You know, you can also find out how you can give towards that. If you feel that it could be something that can help or would do a lot of people a lot of good to have that as a support, a means of support to hold on to that memory. So I'm putting it right now on the chat just so you all could see. Anyone who sees the replay, you can see this. That's the website. But also, lastly, for those who are trying again and you're nervous, you're anxious, you're wondering, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to get through? There's no way I'm going to make this. You know, this is probably going to happen again. And
Mm.
for some people, that is unfortunately, that is the case, that it will happen again, that you may have this experience again, but you won't know unless you allow yourself to go through it. This now site and also group organization that I'm speaking to that I believe would do a lot of good is called Pregnancy After Loss Support. And it's a powerful group because they really work on helping women and men to go ahead and to get some resources, get some support, and to also normalize what they're going through, because it's important to know that you're not alone. That's one of the keys that tends to also help us, is to know we're not alone and that we can get through this. So it's up there as well, y'all. If you're looking at this replay, you can see that. Go on to this website, go on their page, Instagram page, Facebook page, powerful stuff. And this is just to remind you that it's okay and you can try again. It's not for everyone, because at some point, some of us may find peace and it's like, I'm okay. You know, I'm good if I don't have another one, or I choose not to have another one. Again, not too much more to say. Thank you again to Dr. Pierre Louise for being here and for supporting our conversation. Can you just tell us how we can find you Dr. Pierre Louis, tell us how we can get to you.
On Facebook and Instagram, Embrace Therapy.
Okay.
And my website is www.iembracetherapy.com.
Okay, so we've got that, y'all. I want you to just remember that we are here for you. You are not alone. We are in a world and in an era where there is just a lot of support at your access. So I hope that you would reach out. We are honored and privileged to be able to do what it is that we do. And don't hesitate to just reach out. You can check me out on Facebook, also on Instagram. And again, I am Jennifer M. Wilshire. I am licensed clinical social worker for Lifeline Therapy Center, and feel free to reach out there. Thank you again, y'all, for those of you who tuned in and those of you that are going to catch the replay. Hopefully, this is informative, helpful in any way. Be blessed. Thank you again, Dr. Pierre Louise, for being here with us. We love you. We appreciate you. Bye,
Thank you.
y'all.